poor, as we know, are worst affected when the economy falters. A survey by Afrobarometer shows a significant number of Africans are failing to meet their basic needs. Well, I'm joined now from our Cape Town studio by Afrobarometer's Gugu Nonjinge. Gugu, a very good evening to you. Thanks so much for your time. And you're hearing the news today of these GDP figures, of the country being in a recession at this time, and where this places South Africans. And I would imagine, had you done your survey just a couple of months from now, your findings would have appeared much worse than what you have at the moment.
Definitely. In 2018, when we conducted the Afrobarometer survey, which is in September and August 2018, when we did the survey and testing, or rather seeing citizens' perception around the areas of economy or the economic conditions within the country, we saw that a number, or rather significant proportions of South Africans actually saying that the country is going in a wrong direction. That's about 68% of them. Even though significant proportions of them still, again, showed that their present living conditions as well have worsened over the years. I mean, this is data that we released in 2019, as the president again is saying that the citizens, or rather the citizens in South Africa, have been noting the pinch within the economy. So it is no surprise, because they've already been seeing such results within their present living conditions.
And I think just to paint the picture for us, Gugu, we're talking about lived poverty, you're talking about basic needs. Just paint that picture of exactly what we're talking about, how people are actually living or barely surviving.
So in calculating the lived poverty index, the Afrobarometer asks its citizens questions in terms of how long, or rather how long have they gone without accessing their basic needs, such as cash income, even though cash income is not necessarily a need at this point. But we do note that it does have a spillover effect on a citizen accessing things like food, clean water. The data does show that a proportion, or rather 6 in 10 citizens actually have gone without food in the last year or so. A majority of them, again, haven't had clean water, access to clean water, medical care, even though the government is doing much on these things. But also citizens' perception on their areas to accessing these things have kind of worsened over the years. And it's something that we are seeing in their reporting, rather than when we're calculating the lived poverty index. So again, if we're looking at South Africa within the Southern Africa region, it might be doing relatively well, but then again, we have a significant proportions of citizens who go without having food on their table, or even access to clean water.
Okay, so it's basically being able to reach those basic services, even though they might be somewhere, but either not properly available, maybe too far away. They are not able, they might be elderly, they might be infirm, not able to actually get. Just clarify that for us when you say that they might not be able to access what is there.
So the Afrobarometer asked the citizens, how long have you gone without accessing clean water? And the citizen who, in the response category, will have always more than 7 days, for example, several times. And then we do calculate or create an index of which we rate the country from 0 to a 4, of which it's a high lived poverty to no lived poverty, using those citizens' points when they rate the country in regards to them accessing those services. And as I mentioned, close to half of South Africans do not have access to these basic needs, such as clean water. However, a majority of them, a significant proportion of them, have also noted that they haven't had access to cash income, even though it is not necessarily a need. But also, as Afrobarometer, we do note that it does equate to them not being able to afford to have a job in South Africa, which of course affect them accessing some services and some basic needs as well.
I'm sure throughout the day, and since these figures came out, and news of us being in a recession again, lots of criticism of government. Excuse me. Has government done enough? It says it's not surprised. What has it done? Is it really, putting those plans? Are those plans the right plans? Now, very interesting here. You say, more important, the personal characteristics are factors at the level of government and the state. People who live in countries with longer experiences of democratic governments are less likely to live in poverty. Where do we fall in that in that finding, especially if we look at 25 years of democracy? Is that enough? Isn't it enough? Can we blame government?
I definitely think that we can blame government in some extent. The lived poverty index in South Africa is at its lowest since we launched the Afrobarometer survey 20 years ago. And again, it's also been 25 years since democracy. It does say something. I mean, the data in South Africa, when we ask citizens if government is doing fairly bad, fairly well, or even good when it comes to addressing things of, or rather issues of economic importance in the country, the citizens have actually rated the government really poorly in terms of the government doing work that addresses these economic issues in the country. And that's something that the government needs to take into account and also look into really deeply. In the questionnaire as well, or rather in the survey, we see that citizens in South Africa would even give up things like elections for the government to actually get a government that was going to act correctly when it comes to providing things like jobs or even attending to their basic necessities and their basic needs.
And I see there's also, sort of differentiation made between those who live in different areas when looking at urban or suburban areas. And like we've been saying, it's commonly the poor who suffer the most. But with where we are now and what we're seeing, are we seeing those lines getting blurred now with our state of affairs as of today?
So as we disaggregate the data by socio-demographics, so basically looking at the citizens who responded to this question, we see that a significant proportion of those who have high lived poverty in South Africa are those within the rural areas. The majority of them are black South Africans, followed by coloured South Africans, and most of them are based in the Eastern Cape. When we're looking at their levels of education, majority of them who face high lived poverty in South Africa have no formal education, followed by those who just have primary education. So basically, you can kind of sense that it is a majority of South Africans who are not employed because majority of them have no schooling and then in the rural parts of South Africa. And those are the parts that the government needs to penetrate quite effectively in order to provide for these type of citizens, in order for them to raise their lived poverty index.
Thanks very much for that insight, especially relating it to where we are today. That's